Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
Welcome back to the High Rise, a laid-back, data-backed conversation where we talk all things cannabis from products and market analysis through the lens of data. My name is Cy Scott with Headset, and I am joined, as always, by Emily Paxhia of Poseidon.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the High Rise.
Emily, it's so good to be back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Cy. How are you?
I'm good. I cannot believe we are already well into January here. How are the holidays?
The holidays were quiet, and the week between Christmas and New Year's was a bit odd this year because it was a really full week, and there was a full market day on New Year's Eve. Being on the West Coast, that's not too bad because, the market closes at 1 my time, but still, it just felt like kind of a full week, but that's okay because, Omicron was doing its thing, running around, so celebrations got kind of quiet. I did, however, have a very fun little excursion south of the border with some of my work colleagues who are female in the industry. And so that was a really fun, we were calling it the summit because it was just a group of us who've gotten to be really close through the past few years of working in this industry. And, we were laughing that it was both, work and play because you're hanging out with a bunch of people who have founded companies or are high-level operators in companies. And, I was on a Zoom with my team, and then I just got to turn around and say, hey, Rosie Matteo, do you know this person? And she's like, yep, I'll make an introduction. And the same thing happened with Maggie. She was sitting right next to me, and we actually got on a conference call with someone that I was doing a reference check on, and it was a really fortuitous turn of events to have people who are connected and doing good work. And, Rosie and I always talk about being in the room, and I think that's part of our way of, creating a new room where more people can have access to contacts and working together and doing it in a fun setting. So it was cool.
That sounds really cool, and I'm actually really jealous.
Well, you can come to the room maybe. What about you? What did you do over the holidays?
Nothing that exciting. Went down to Southern California to spend some time with the family. My parents, my wife's parents. We try and do that, and it's pretty good. But this year, it was just pouring rain. Like California, top to bottom, we were underwater. And being based in Seattle, the stereotype is very true, right? It's just always raining, and it seems like more rain. I think there's some like records that we've been breaking up here because it's normally like this kind of gray perpetual drizzle kind of, one of those. It's not like heavy rain, but we've had a lot of heavy rain. And then we went down to California. It was like very heavy rain, and it's just like no escape. But it was a nice little break. Took a little time between Christmas and New Year's to try and not work too much. And that's always helpful to kind of come in refreshed because it's, if you don't take that time, and it's hard to, right? But if you don't kind of break from it and stop thinking about it for a minute, you're not as effective, I feel like. So that was nice. Coming into this year, I was like really excited to get back to it last week. And, this weekend Headset, we have like a leadership offsite. So super excited about, that and kind of the plans for the year and getting everyone going. So taking that break is always helpful, but It was in Mexico. There weren't enough margaritas being had at my in-laws' house, but that's okay. Maybe
it's I'll bring a margarita anywhere, but it's just sometimes you just hashtag take the meeting. But I was excited when I came back to see the Headset market projections going into 2025, and. Right. Our team, we were just talking, we were digging through that data set because you guys provided the state by state level. And if anyone is listening, I would highly recommend checking it out because it's very interesting to look at how this is all projecting out going into 2025. And I think after a year of some kind of tough cyclical things that went on in the industry in terms of the market, some of the regulatory challenges that California faced, et cetera, I think it was nice to take a zoom out and look at kind of where the industry is heading and kind of reassess everything. So
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's actually something I wanted to kind of bring up for the listeners because it is freely available on our website you can find it at headset.io. So this is the first time we've done this. We've done projections out, at a macro level across the US and across Canada. But for this exercise, we really focused on the US and we focused on a state by state projection to kind of really, think pretty deeply on each market, each region, and what the opportunity is there. And it was an interesting exercise for the team. We took in things like census data to get population estimates. We calculated assumed per capita spend on both medical and adult use markets, comparing them to similar sized markets using things like CPI data for alcohol sales, like that's like, consumer price index stuff, assume medical participation for 21 plus, in those markets, and like the population that'll be 21 plus as well. And then one of the more interesting thing is we discounted it based on probability of legalization. So this was, kind of like we have a scenario that we outline on the website where, we look at Hawaii and we project out based on population, based on some dynamics, it would be this. And we think there's like a 10% chance that we would see a legal adult use market there. So that discounts the total dollar amount coming out of that state. And then we, added them all up and, projected out for 2025. So pretty cool exercise and really neat kind of to look at this. And we'll see, it's definitely a time capsule, and we can look back at like in 3 short years where we're at. But some highlights, some states that really stood out. I think the first and foremost is Florida. And we talk a lot about Florida because we talk a lot about the companies and organizations that are operating in Florida today. Our forecast for Florida came in at $3.2 billion, which makes it second behind California and actually, beating New York, which was a pretty surprising outcome for me when I saw that. But I think it's proving to be a massive market already in medical. And then with the population size that it has, 16 million, 21 plus by 2025, I think that outpaces New York actually. And then, Miami's a pretty hot market right now, right? So everyone's moving to Florida apparently. So yeah, that was interesting. And then New York comes in at 2.8 billion. In New York, we know it's adult use, so that got 100%, probability there. And then we know the stores are well, most likely the stores are going to start rolling out in 2023. And, good population with 15 million of 21 plus. And then after that is New Jersey at 1.6 billion. And it goes on, and you can look at all these different kind of states and you can download the full report. But, pretty exciting times. And this is just state by state. This doesn't take into account any sort of federal change with the federal position. So this is just kind of status quo, as things move ahead. But I encourage everyone to take a look. You can find it at headset.io, in our report section, and then you can download it from there.
Yeah, I'm glad we talked about it because the team has just been really digging in on it, and it's been nice. I'm so excited that Headset started putting that type of information and materials out there. So, like I said, when I got into cannabis, there wasn't any level of data set like that. Well, there couldn't. To be fair, there couldn't really be because there weren't that many states legal, right. And there wasn't this level of history of sales and information we could track and looking into the future and projecting. But now we've kind of understood the pace of these things and how it all works. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, and any projections that existed then were just anybody's guess, right? Like you just took population, you said, hey, I think, 10% of people are going to be consumers, and here's the number. And everything was wildly over projected, I think, in markets like Canada, as you can see. But we've learned a lot, right? We've seen a lot of markets roll out. We've seen a lot of what that looks like and the challenges, and even Ontario. And we'll talk about Canada. One of the interesting things is, 2021 was a good year for Ontario, had a lot of growth. It still has a long way to go. And this is a number of years into it. So, things take longer. And I think, factoring that into some of our estimates, while it's a big number, in the end, when you look at the total US, it's still, we're still pretty conservative, just kind of what we see. And hopefully things can just move faster. But even in markets like in New York, this stuff just takes time. Even so many years into legalization, and, everyone has all these other states to look at, it still takes time. All these different markets have their unique dynamics. Mm-hmm. And speaking of like time, so, we're in 2022, we're still in the throes of a pandemic. Just seems like just unbelievably never ending at this point. One of the things, I was looking at recently, our friend Matt McGinley actually had asked if we'd seen any sort of data, if our analysts had seen anything on like the kind of some of the behaviors we saw at the beginning of the pandemic because, of this current situation, this just massive ramp that we're seeing. And if you remember back in the early days of the pandemic, the panic buying and like stockpiling and all of that. So we looked, and even though we're in, another kind of pandemic ramp, it's not reflecting in the same way. And I think I'm making some assumptions here, but I think we're just all like used to it. And I think there was this concern back in April of 2020, which is crazy, 2020, that the stores were going to get shut down. And if the stores got shut down, there was going to be no access. And so people went in and purchased a lot more. Plus the pandemic was brand new, right? And so those two factors. So even though we're, in this brutal Omicron situation, the numbers, it's not really the same as it was before. But anyways, 2022, still in a pandemic, but it's a whole new year. So, I thought we could talk a little bit about what we're excited for, what we think is on the horizon, or things that we should be thinking about as the year goes on. I think new markets. The first thing, we've got New Jersey supposed to come online in March. Is that still the latest you've heard? Have you heard any different?
Yeah. No. I think we're holding with March.
Holding with March. So that's exciting. And, our projections have that to be a pretty significant market. And a lot of the companies that we talk about here on this High Rise podcast have a solid footprint in New Jersey. So it'll be pretty interesting to see. It'll be cool to watch what's coming out of New York. Again, we don't think there's going to be any stores opening, but I think you'll see a lot of the news on like who's getting licenses, what those licenses look like. People probably announce plans. So I think that'll be just a fun thing to kind of watch as we gear up for the big year next year. Any other new markets that we should be thinking about this year that are like notable?
No, I mean, I think those are the two, and those are some beasts to be watching. But I'm also very excited watching Ohio and Pennsylvania, which I think can go to adult use. This is an election year again. It feels like it's always an election year since forever. But yeah, so it should be interesting to see what happens in those states. I'm pretty bullish on Ohio. I think that Pennsylvania becomes really interesting. I think we just continue to push and see these interesting things. I think Connecticut could see movement this year. Right, and I think that's a legislative action, not a election. I think for that one, is that correct?
I have no idea.
I think that is true, but so I'm excited. I mean, I think we are going to see. It is 2022. I think we're going to see low to slow sequential growth coming out of the earnings calls in Q4 and probably Q1. We always knew, Abner always says this is a stair-step growth story, not just a up and to the right. I think the pandemic altered that a little bit.
With Ascend Wellness.
Yeah, Abner Curtin, the CEO of Ascend. Yeah, thank you. And I always thought that was right on because that's what we have seen. This is an emerging market. It's cyclical, and I think that everyone should just be prepared to kind of watch as these businesses continue to expand their footprints. They open doors, and then markets open, and we'll see big growth. New Jersey alone is going to be a fantastic and really interesting market, and I'm very excited for it. Yeah, so those are some things I think we'll see on that side in 2022. So we've just got to see capital continue to flow into the space. We just keep seeing debt deals being done, but we need the equity markets to catch up. And I don't know if anyone should hang anything on what goes on the federal level. We're staying in touch with it, and so at Poseidon, Sai, this, but we write. We write year-end commentary for all of our investors, of course, reflecting on how the portfolios are performing. But we also write a letter to the founders. And one of the things we were talking about is like, while there may not be movement at the federal level, we have to still continue to lean in to affect change. If you look at other industries that have been influential in terms of policy, for better or for worse, they have leaned in on policy work and done so through time and through treasure, through their dollars. So we have to keep pushing these things, whether or not we have a lot of faith in the system. It doesn't matter. So just because we're frustrated doesn't mean we should become despondent. And so I just, I wanted to make sure that I share that, even though I may not be the biggest bull about what I think we see in terms of federal action. I still think we have to keep our seat at the table because there are other interested political groups that would definitely like to sway things in their direction. So,
Yeah, no, totally, totally. I was just looking at some numbers like on the sequential growth, and there's so many states, so many markets, and we, in California, a big market we cover, it looks like the year ended 2021 about 17% up versus 2020, which is, it's meaningful, but there's I think we have expectations that there's even more growth available in markets like California. Other markets like some of the emerging markets, it's kind of like a tale of two different market types. It's like the emerging markets, which are like Michigan, like kind of newer markets. You're seeing a lot of growth there, and that's the story, right? New market kind of ramps up. California, it's not the newest market, and it's got a lot of headwinds there and challenges, and it all comes down to access, like we've talked about so many times. I think that you'll still see sort of growth, but I think you can see that accelerate, like if California gets out of its way with some of the access, right, and like the
Yep.
store licenses and all that stuff we've talked about, and maybe translating more of those consumers that are going to the illicit market into the regular channels like Ontario. And we'll talk about Ontario, but it like doubled the market 2021 versus 2020 in Canada. And Ontario was notorious for not having any access. It was like so
Right.
few stores. And then now that there are stores, it's growing. I think on a per capita basis, it certainly trails California. So it's still like it's worse there than it is in California. But that's some growth. And I think that you can see some similar patterns there. But I'm with you. Like it'll be a lot of sequential growth. It wasn't that huge of a Q4 from a revenue build. Like December was up a bit, seems like in most markets, but I know it's not massive. So yeah, more of that story for this year for sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think you're absolutely right. If we and this is why it makes it stair step, is it is kind of like the lever of regulation that can make all the difference in the world. Like, I know right now, just personally, I know of 3 stores that are waiting to get open in California but are delayed from
Mm-hmm.
just getting the license, the final steps, and they're just they're ready to go and just in great locations that could serve great populations. And so let's say each one of those doors is a 10 to 20 million dollar a year door. That those things make differences. It goes from 0 to 10 to 20 in 1 year. That's a big that's a that's a stair step. So
Really, really is. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, it's just one of those things. What's funny too is like some people are like, oh, is it about the demand? It is not about the demand. I mean, for this. So, Quebec, just to share a like interesting anecdote,
Mm-hmm.
their liquor stores, and the same thing for cannabis stores, require coronavirus vaccination proof for entry. Vaccine appointments in one day went from 1,500 to 6,000 in one day.
Wow.
So people want to go buy cannabis. You know what I mean? So if you give them access, they'll do it. And I mean, I just love it. Every time a market opens, I miss the Illinois opening. I may go to New Jersey for New Jersey because
Mm.
I don't know. I get like very like excited and emotional when I see people lining up to get cannabis. And I had the chance to be in Seattle when Washington opened, and I'll never forget it. It was a great experience.
Yeah, and that reminds me, actually, Montana opened up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Montana, yeah, finally opened up. So I mean, it's going to be a smaller market, obviously, just on a population count. But we have a team member at Headset who's out there and was able to go to a store on the first day, which is really cool to see. And said there was a fair amount of people. I think again it's for Montana, and depending on where you're at in Montana, it's it's going to vary, but it's great to see. I mean, that's a red state, right?
Yeah, what did we say? There are more smoking guns than smoking people in Montana. We need the sound effect for that joke. It's good. Montana. I've always wanted to go there, and I can only imagine how beautiful it would be with cannabis. You know
Yeah.
what else is an interesting trend I do want to track is, there's dry January, which I'm not participating in. My January started off soaked in tequila, but I think that this week I'm trying to do the high dry. Wonder, the beverage in California, they're doing the high and dry campaign, which I thought was really cute, and so they had a special. So I've been leaning in on the beverage category while I'm trying to dry out a little bit from my holidays, but it's been fun. It's a fun way to do it. And like they sent us a little thing with like a cocktail card so you could kind of make a little mixed cannabis beverage, which was really fun. And so I think these experiences are going to enrich, how we kind of seek alternatives to alcohol, which is fun.
Yeah, totally. Totally. So, the last thing I think for 2022 kind of projections, we talked a lot about safe banking last year. It felt like was the hot issue. Obviously, it didn't happen in the end. Do you think something like that is inevitable this year? Or do you think that could be the same story where we're in 2023 saying, oh, I guess it didn't happen again? How do you think its chances are this year?
Yeah, I'm going to
Same?
act as though it
Better?
yeah.
Or it doesn't even matter?
Yeah, I'm going to act as though it's not going to happen, and I'm going to continue to try to push to think about ways we can provide resources for equity and applicants and small businesses who are not raising massive amounts of capital. I mean, there's no question that the MSO, the large top 5 to 10 MSOs, have all the access to credit facilities that they want in many forms and fashions. And so there's a lot of money sitting at the table for that. And it's just going to create a greater divide. And I think that's just too bad for an industry that should have a great small business and social equity component to it. But so I'm going to continue to, in the absence of seeing changing in banking reform, I'm going to continue to do that. And I think that, one of the things a lot of people talk about is that there's no institutional capital at the table, but I can tell you there is institutional capital coming to the table. It's just going to do it through different channels. And, one of those are the ETFs that exist, and there are multiple in the space. And that's a great conduit because those are exchange traded vessels. So, there are going to be channels for capital to get into the space, and so I'm optimistic that the equity markets will catch up. But I'm going to continue to just focus on business fundamentals and growing companies in spite of what the politicians do or do not do.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I can only hope that they get out of their own way. I mean, it's such a bipartisan issue, and with the election year coming up, it feels like something that could very well happen. But a lot of growth outside of that, regardless. Just a nice. It would be a nice headline to see something in the U.S. finally after so many years. But if not, still tons of opportunity here. So yeah, I'm with you. That's kind of 2022, right? That's what we gotta expect here in a nutshell. Some new markets, watching those emerging markets, watching existing markets kind of maybe optimize, hopefully, in a variety of ways. Obviously, more M&A. I'm sure we'll see some big announcements this year. But yeah, it'll be a fun one. It'll be fun. Lots to watch.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I'm very excited about 2022. I think it's going to be great. And 2023 and what goes on from here. I just think, and I said that too in the letter. I feel like this is a year we could see some things see real escape velocity. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, me too. Let's talk about some news. A couple things. Let's look over at Canada here. Tilray released their fiscal Q2 earnings. I believe their fiscal quarter ended in November 2021, which would be like September, October, November in sales. The big headline, or their headline, was that net revenue increased about 20% to $155 million from the prior year quarter, but it seems to be that it was weaker than expected, missing most analyst consensus estimates by I think about 9%. And everyone's pointing to kind of like a slowing Canada market sales, and I think it's stuff that we can look at, and certainly Canada is slowing, but it did have some growth in 2021, like that Ontario number. So I think this also isn't just Canada in general. It's Tilray and the position in some of the competition that they're having, and they call that out, and I'll get to that in a second. But it looks like most analysts that I was looking at were talking about highlighting cost savings, but some of that might be from some unique kind of financial work, something about their share price also driving some of that. But that is a big piece of it, right? As they're trying to get these costs down as they kind of wait for the market to catch up and they, deal with some of this competition. So I think I guess it's less than people expected, but the market reacted pretty positively yesterday, I noticed. I think it closed up like 13%.
Yep, and I think it's just, it speaks to the fact of what it's like to have access to the public, the
Right.
the exchanges. And so it just like people can buy it on Robinhood, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, it is important when you see these big headlines to dig into the nitty-gritty details. And we're fortunate because we do have a lot of analysts who cover this space, and Twitter can be very active about it. And there are certain resources that you can find that are more trustworthy than others. But, just like certain things to keep an eye out for, like they did change their definition of adjusted EBITDA, so it does not include inventory impairments. And at the same time, they wrote down 12 million in inventory in the quarter. So it's like, I'm just curious, in the U.S. companies that are aiming to uplist when it's possible are Gap. And Gap is, I consider it to be a gold standard of accounting practices and methodologies. And one of the things that was a big challenge for this industry, I remember Matt Carnes talking about this, is, how we handle biological assets as an industry that does have biological assets. And
Right.
It's just interesting. So, always recommend folks diving in on these things. And the other thing is that, there was headlines about quote unquote profitability, but, Alan Brockstein points out that it is related entirely to the decline of the stock price, whereby the warrants and convertible notes are out of the money. And so that by that nature reduces their liabilities. So therefore, they can technically be counted as profitable. Now, yes, there was cost considerations that were being made as they're trying to do cost cutting and get leaner as an organization. But we also saw that their market share declined in Canada. So you can't blame market. So maybe, it's kind of like that old saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. But I feel like maybe don't hate the game, hate the player. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's just accountability. And, as a person in finance, one of the big rules about reporting is you can't move the goalpost or your measurements. You have to kind of keep it consistent so people can track what you're measuring against, and you're not kind of giving an appearance of something that's not necessarily there. So I just think it's something, dig in carefully. They are big. They are leaning in on Europe. Europe does seem to be very interesting. Germany could be very interesting. They've had long and established relationships there. So I'm definitely watching to see what happens next. I just figured those are some things to point out, as we do know some folks who invest and are digging through these filings. So if it's of help to folks to point that out.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to kind of read the fine print and see what's going on there. Because, that was one of the highlights, with this whole thing was cost savings. They also talk about, in some quotes, they said, looking at our performance highlights across key markets, we maintained our number one cannabis market share position in Canada despite market saturation and related competitive challenges on the strength of our brands and adept pricing and marketing adjustments. Importantly, we believe these adjustments will enable us to aggressively recapture share when the market right sizes. And I thought that was an interesting comment, like when the market right sizes. And, we all know that Canada is underperforming, and, when it right sizes, I think it the question is like, well, how is it going to right size? And I kind of looked at a comp and pulled some headset data. So looking at California for 2021, 5.3 billion in sales. And this is like pre-tax, post-discount totals. And then I looked at Ontario, and Ontario being like the largest population in Canada. I think it's like 45% of the country lives in Ontario.
Yeah.
Ontario population's 14.57 million. California population's 39.5 million. So Ontario is about 36% of the California population. So you think that they would, if you do the math and take their 1.5 billion. So Ontario did 1.4 billion in sales this year. California did 5.3. And that tracks, if you extrapolate that out, Ontario, and say, okay, well, let's say that the kind of per capita spend, comes in, at this rate, what does it look like if it matches the population of California? It would be 3.8 billion. So if they had the population of California, they would only do 3.8. So they are behind, where California is if you just look at per capita basically. So there is room to right size, I think. And we're just complaining a bit about California. I think California has room to right size as well. And so that seems to be be the story. But that said, Ontario did show, good growth. I mean, it
Yeah.
doubled the market this year and will continue to grow. I think, you hear, anecdotally, I hear some challenges of like over licensing, too many retailers. It's hard for a lot of these retailers to stand out. But 2021 was a good from top line sales in Canada. Just overall was much better than 2020. So hopefully it's on the process of right sizing. And this is what they're saying is like these adjustments. They're adjusting their pricing. They're adjusting their marketing. They're leaning into their brands so that they can capture this market when it is in a better place. So
Yeah.
it's on the way, I guess.
I think one of the other things as this company continues to, I mean, talk about M&A, we know when did they do the Sweetwater,
Sweetwater
transaction? Was that 21 or was that 20?
I think it was 21.
So they've got 20, that, and then they got the Mile High Distillery.
The distillery. Yeah.
And, one of the analysts noted that a significant amount of their revenue is actually not cannabis at this point. And so it'll be interesting to see as these companies kind of shift, if they do start to branch into these other categories, the analysts will have to, value them. Like, is it some of the parts? Like, how are they going to think about this? So it's just one of the things that we'll have to watch as this, and it may be just like a bigger question for cannabis as cannabis becomes just more consumer rather than cannabis. And we've talked about this before, but Tilray has certainly been one of the first to endeavor into these activities. So that'll be one to watch. And it was interesting too that as a company that's been leaning in on these beverage acquisitions, that as you pointed out before we started, that AB InBev, that contract is now done.
That's right. They've severed the relationship, I guess, with Anheuser-Busch or AB InBev, which was a big headline, I think, in like 2018, maybe even before. And that's, no longer the case. And it sounds, I mean, I don't know the details on why that is. I don't know if, they just never got anywhere with it. But obviously, like Sweetwater and the Spirits Company, they're kind of working their way to become an ABI in a way.
Yeah.
And it's a good mention, that I kind of begs the question because also they mentioned Sweetwater acquired Green Flash, which is a smaller brewery.
Mm-hmm.
You see their beer quite a bit in like California. I've seen it a lot. I think they're San Diego based. Mm-hmm. And there was another one, Alpine. And so Sweetwater's growing, and these microbreweries, they get more competitive. And so that's interesting. So, at what point are they just kind of a hybrid cannabis, alcohol? Is it not really just a cannabis company anymore? Is it some new term? Are we going to see more of this from others? Because it does seem like they continue to grow that side. It's not like at first I thought it was going to be like let's place a bet here, and then we're going to use this for production of cannabis drinks. That was kind of the story, right? But now it's maybe more about like we're going to actually be something different.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was kind of like buying optionality for the future. But then when I saw the revenue contribution, I was like, well, maybe it was also about buying revenue. Interesting times.
Yeah, and then I guess one of the last things we can call out on this is that they did, as part of this earnings, they announced that they have a new parent name, Tilray Brands. We'll see. I went to the website, tilray.com, and it's not really reflected very well there. I didn't see anything about Tilray Brands. I saw, it's the homepage is just the press release about the Afria stuff from May, I think. So it's pretty dated there. No mention, like in the navigation, there's like Tilray Europe, Tilray Latin America, but you don't see anything about Sweetwater and stuff. So it'll be interesting if they lean into it more than just like a headline in a press release with these earnings. But it seems like if this is their play, maybe it could be reflected a bit better in their public facing stuff. I just don't see it quite yet, or maybe I'm not looking in the right places. But Tilray.com, you'd think it'd be all over there. So that's that. But we'll see how the rest of the Canadians do, and then obviously we'll continue to track what's going on in the U.S. here. Mm-hmm. Last thing I have on my list, MJ Biz. So MJ Biz, the oldest, longest running, biggest, I don't know the right word, but MJ BizCon has been around for a number of years, and we've attended it pretty much every year with Leafly, and then now with Headset. And actually, MJ Biz is a partner of Headset, but they made some headlines this week with acquisition. So they got purchased by Emerald Holdings, which I believe is an events company that seems to own a number of event properties, one of which I noticed was the Pizza Expo So, a good cannabis conference, I thought it couldn't be beat, but maybe the Pizza Expo is where it's at. So, anyways, good for them, the team over there. It's a great conference. I love going every year. It's exhausting, but it's a nice place to go, and everyone's there. And it sounds like nothing's going to change as per their announcement. It sounds like Chris Walsh will still be at the helm there. So, hopefully they just get more resources and are able to do what they do best there.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, that events company is a private equity firm that does invest into media and events opportunities. And I'm just really excited to see something like this happen because, we all do think about when, outside groups start to view cannabis as interesting enough and important enough that they want to have a toehold or an investment of significance in it. And this was that. So kudos to the MJ Biz team. Have been going, like you said, we've been going since 2013. Watched it go from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands, and can't say enough about the impact of that. We used to call it a leading indicator of the growth of the industry, to go to the show and see how quickly it was growing in size, and to see also the mix of people that were showing up versus who were there in the beginning. The beginning was certainly like OG folks and really great for that reason. And then you just started to see more and more range of human beings at these events. And I thought it was always a good experience to witness that.
I remember the early days. It was in the Rio. You remember the Rio, and just that conference. It's come a long way, I gotta say, since then.
You've come a long way, baby. Yeah, that was. There were some low points for me at the Rio. I can say. I was like,
I think a lot of people have probably uttered that sentence.
I think my brother-in-law, who's a lawyer in the industry, said this is a 7-layer dip of bum out. There was a very sad scene involving a lady removing her clothes while a man was eating some sad-looking meal right over a slot machine, and it was just like,
oh my gosh,
the cross-section was too much to bear.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. How far they've come. Yeah. In less than 10 years. So pretty good exit at 120 million there for them. So good job over there, MJ Biz, and yeah, it's a great conference, and I'm excited to see it continue as such.
Yes, very excited. Good thing for the industry to see things like that.
It really is. Well, I think that'll do it for us today. Emily, thank you so much. As always, it is great to be back. I think we've got a lot of good stuff planned this year. We're really looking at some exciting things, more great guests. We've got some really good ones on deck, lined up here that will be joining us shortly. And so more to come from us, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that on Twitter and other places. Yes. We're looking at all sorts of things for the community, for all the listeners, like how we can better engage with everybody, hear from you guys in different ways, and trying to do more in-person podcasts. And there's always, now with kind of travel back, or sort of back, you never know these days, but always good to do this in person as well. So more to come, lots of exciting stuff we'll be talking about, but thanks for listening. And, please subscribe, rate us, review us, tell your friends. It really helps the show. All right. With that, we'll see y'all next week.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.